Okay. Okay. The shir today have to go, unfortunately, to a levaya, to a funeral. So I will try to keep the shir somewhat shorter than usual. And okay, it's Parshas Toldos. So the Torah mentions there that Eila Toldos Yitzchak ben Avram holed es Yitzchak, and the Torah describes about the trouble Rivka had in becoming pregnant, and then after many years, I should say, of davening, of prayer, of pleading to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, both on her part and on Yitzchak's part, she becomes pregnant. And then the Torah says, the children agitated within her, and it caused her some type of pain. And she went to inquire of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. She went to Shem, and she asked Shem what was the reason. Why was her pregnancy different than the pregnancy of other women, the way Medrash explains it? And Shem said to her, two nations, Shnei Goyim bevitnech, two nations on your womb. Shnei Luumim, it's another word for nations, will come from inside, shall be separated. So now the Medrash, when it's brought down that the children agitated within her while she was pregnant. There were twins there. It was Yaakov and Esav. So the Medrash mentions a number of opinions, but the first opinion is the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan. And the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan was that she had this sensation, this feeling, as if one embryo wanted to wage war, wanted to go kill the other embryo, and the other embryo wanted to kill the other twin. Each of the twins, according to the Medrash, were trying to kill each other. And it is when she had that feeling, that sensation, that she went to the Shiva of Shem Be'aver, and to ask what was the reason for these strange feelings. And they answered that she has twins, there are two nations, and they will develop into two groups, two separate groups, and so the question is, what is the Medrash telling us? According to Rabbi Yochanan, the Medrash is saying that she felt as if one embryo was trying to kill the other one, as if Esav was trying to kill Yaakov, and the embryo that became Yaakov was trying to kill Esav. So the question is, and so what was the answer? Shnei Goyim v'itnech. There are two there are two nations in your midst, and ultimately one will take precedence over the other. But so we understand the fact that but the Medrash implies and says it's not only that will kill, but will want to kill. Now we understand the idea that Esav wanted to kill Yaakov. At the end of this week's Sedra, after Yaakov took the brachos that Esav felt was coming his way, so Esav said that after Yitzchak, Vayomer Esav libo yikvu yeme'eva lavi v'harga es Yaakov achi. So after Yitzchak passes away, so then he intended to kill Esav, but from the expression in the Medrash, it appears that each wanted to kill the other. How are we to understand the idea that Yaakov would want? What is the meaning of the fact that Yaakov wanted to kill Esav? How are we to understand this expression that Yaakov wanted to kill Esav? Now, a person could suggest that perhaps it has reference to Mechemes Amalek, the law of Amalek, because the Torah tells us, Mocho Timcha, it's talking about the future, and what was going on in her womb was expressive, or what she sensed was going on in her womb was expressive of what will happen in the future. So perhaps we could suggest, because we know that Amalek is a descendant of Esav, and we know that in regard to Esav, there's a mitzvah of Mocho Timcha Zeicher Amalek. Now, why is there a mitzvah of Mocho Timcha Zeicher Amalek? Very difficult to understand this mitzvah, but I think that it has to be understood from the following perspective. We know that Amalek was the initiator of anti-Semitism after Yetzias Mitzrayim, after Egypt, after the Exodus from Egypt. Amalek, all the nations of the world were scared to wage war against the Jewish people. And Amalek waged war against the Jewish people. It's not so much a question of revenge, but Amalek created a situation that other nations throughout the history of the Jewish people would now come and wage war against the Jewish nation. Amalek wasn't only a nation that attacked the Jewish people, but Amalek initiated a philosophy of trying to eradicate the Jewish people. We say Pesach at night. In every generation, they arise, not just to take control of our land, not just to take control of our possessions, but l'chalosenu, to destroy us. And who was the initiator of this? The initiator was Amalek. And I want to suggest, the Torah says, Milchama Lashem ba'Amalek midor dor. In a sense, there is a philosophy, a culture. Amalek is a culture not just of anti-Semitism, but a culture of annihilation of the Jewish people. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells us that if you don't eradicate Amalek now you can't go to war against Amalek at every moment. My father would say that he based it on an expression in the Rambam, in the Hagdamah to the Parashas Mishnah. Person could suggest other explanations, but the way my father understood it, when a Navi comes, as Shmuel came to Shaul, and tells them now is the time to destroy Amalek. If we do not destroy Amalek at that time, at that moment, then that nation of Amalek will come and destroy the Jewish people. It is a war of self-defense. It's not a simple vengeance, but it's a war of self-defense. But usually a war of self-defense is when we see the enemy, as we just saw, when the enemy enters our territory, when the enemy murders in a barbaric fashion Jewish people. So we recognize, at least some of us, recognize that as a war of self-defense. There are those who want to be stupid, who want to ignore reality, who want to make believe that they didn't see what the whole world saw. And if they did see, they want to forget. After World War II, it took a number of years for the deniers to arise. This year, it didn't take a week. And unfortunately, as the Zohar tells us, sometimes Amalekius, the culture of Amalek, spreads to even within the Jewish people. And there are fools. Most of them have serious mental problems, in my opinion. But there are fools that want to make believe that there is no threat, that it isn't a war of self-defense. And there are even those that want to justify it with what they call the occupation, and they'll justify the burning of men, women, and children, women with their mothers, with their children. They will justify rape because what they call the occupation. How do you explain it rationally? The answer is there's no rational explanation. But people Sometimes because they want to believe something, because they think if they say something that wouldn't be expected of them, people will think that they're smart, when they know the very opposite is true. Because they want to be the center of attention. So somehow, these fools, the capos of our time, the servants of the contemporary Nazis, not because the contemporary Nazis put them into service, but because they volunteered their service. So can say, oh, it's not true. There are films, and they'll say those films were made up. And on what basis do they say it? Do they have any firsthand knowledge? There was no one there that denied these facts. They can only attribute it to their very bad self-perception. And they think that becoming the capos of today, they'll get a better self-perception. But the truth of the matter is, long-term, short-term, they'll become even less than they are. So the Milchama against Amalek, of course, this requires a leap of faith. But if a Navi comes and tells us, go fight Amalek, what the Navi is telling us, if you don't make a preemptive strike against Amalek now, then Amalek is going to come and annihilate you. So the war against Amalek is a war of self-defense. Now, it's true, today we don't have a Navi. We have no prophets. And we certainly don't know who is Amalek. And many have suggested that perhaps there is no nation of Amalek today, because Basan Chorev Bibas Kololam Kulo, the whole world was mixed up, and there is no nation of Amalek. Consequently, that mitzvah, even though theoretically, as the Rambam expresses it, is a mitzvah olam vaed. It's a permanent mitzvah, but it only applies in generations where there is a nation of Amalek. And today there is no longer a nation of Amalek. But it's a war against Amalek. So we could say, when we go to a war of self-defense, when we defeat Amalek, when we eradicate the nation of Amalek, we are not eradicating, it's not so much eradicating the nation of Amalek, but we are see ourselves as saving the Jewish people. So we could say, perhaps, and I really do not think that that's the explanation, but we could perhaps have suggested that the impression that the two twins wanted to kill each other. And we understand the idea of Esav wanting to kill Yaakov. That has been the history. That has been our history throughout the years. But where do we see Yaakov wanting to kill Esav? Yaakov only wants to kill Esav when killing Esav is defending the Jewish people from Esav, when it's a war of self-defense. However, this places great limitations on that statement. First of all, it's limited to Amalek. Amalek was a small part of the descendants of Esav. As a matter of fact, the Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim says, why does the Torah tell us who the kings of Esav are? The different kings. There were 7 kings in Esav before there was a king among the Jewish people. Because the Torah wants to emphasize to us that we should know that there are many nations among the descendants of Esav. And the mitzvah of Milchemes Amalek, of fighting the war against Amalek, is only against Amalek. It's not against the other descendants of Esav. So this would be limiting what it says about Esav only to Amalek. And also, of course, it would limit it, according to my father, to a time where there is a Navi, where there is a prophet. Milchama Lashem b'Amalek midor dor. There's a war against Amalek in every generation. When the Navi Lashem, when you receive the word from God, that now is the time to eradicate Amalek. And my father, but I want to suggest, and then also in the Sefer HaMitzvos, there are 2 textual readings. The traditional text of the Sefer HaMitzvos says that in order to fight a Milchemes Rishus, a voluntary war, not a war that's obligatory, like Milchemes Amalek. So you, in order to fight a voluntary war, you need to ask the Urim V'Tumim. You have to get instructions from the Urim V'Tumim was the chest plate, I guess is the best way to that the Kohen Gadol wore, and through a certain process, the letters on the Urim V'Tumim, when questions were asked of the Urim V'Tumim, would light up with messages from God. And when you go to a Milchemes Harishus, a voluntary war, then you couldn't go unless you got permission from the Urim V'Tumim. Now we know that when the Beis HaMikdash is not in existence, there is no Urim V'Tumim. And even in the time of the second Beis HaMikdash, you didn't have the Urim V'Tumim, did not answer when questions were asked. So when there's no Urim V'Tumim, the Rambam says there is no mitzvah of a voluntary war. And Reb Chaim Heller Zatzal, in his text of the Sefer Mitzvahs, he does not limit it to a Milchemes Harishus. but he applies it to a milchemes mitzvah also. That means that if one did not ask the Urim V'Tumim, they couldn't go to war against Amalek. It could be, if we say, like my father, that you went to war when a Navi told you, perhaps the Navi was in place of the Urim V'Tumim, and the Urim V'Tumim could be in place of the Navi. But in any case, according to Reb Chaim Heller, in a generation where there was no Urim V'Tumim, we couldn't wage war against Amalek. And in the Kapach edition, and I got the Kapach edition, excuse me, in the Frankel edition of the Sefer Mitzvahs, so it's mentioned there also that you couldn't wage war, neither a Milchemes Rishus, neither a voluntary war, nor a war of mitzvah. You couldn't wage without the consent, without getting the permission, without asking and receiving an answer from the Urim V'Tumim. So, in a sense, if we say that that it has reference to Amalek, the Medrash that implies that there'll be a time when Yaakov will want to wage war, is limited to a war of Amalek, that's very limited. I want to suggest, well, there is a question. The Rambam says, and I've mentioned this before, the Rambam says there are three types of Milchemes Mitzvah. One is Milchemes Amalek, a war against the nation of Amalek. And you can't go to war against Amalek, according to one Girsa in the Sefer HaMitzvahs, unless you get the consent of the Urim V'Tumim. And then Milchemes Sheva Amim, the war against the 7 nations who occupied Eretz Yisrael, the Canaanites. Also, you couldn't go to war according to this Girsa, according to this text, unless you had the permission of the Urim V'Tumim. But there's a third type of war, and that is the war, Milchemes Yisrael Miyatzor Shabaleim, the battle of the Jews against an enemy who attacked them. Now, it's obvious that if we are attacked, there's a mitzvah to wage war. But the question is, where is this mitzvah contained? It's logical. But if it's called a Milchemes mitzvah, a war of mitzvah, it means there has to be a pasuk in the Torah that serves as the foundation for this mitzvah. Now, my uncle actually said that because we have 2 parshios regarding the nation of Amalek. One parsha is the parsha of in Kiseitse, Machotim Chesech Amalek, eradicate the memory of Amalek. But then there's another parsha in Bishalach, Milchama Lashem Ba'Amalek. There is a war for God against Amalek in every generation. In our generation, there is no Amalek. How are we to understand in every generation? We could say every generation, meaning in every generation when there is a nation of Amalek. However, my uncle said there are nations, and he quoted at least part of this in the name of Reb Chaim and the name of my grandfather. There might not be a nation of Amalek alive today. There might not be genetic Amalek. But there is the nations that have the ideology of Amalek. And what is the ideology of Amalek? Killing, destroying, murdering, eradicating the Jewish people. If they are not the genetic descendants of Amalek. They are the ideological descendants of Amalek. So when a nation comes to attack the Jewish people, so there is a mitzvah, milchama. It's a war for God's sake. To wage a war, it's certainly a war of defense against a nation that is motivated by the ideology of Amalek. However, my father suggested another pasuk. In Parshas Pinchas, the Torah tells us that God told Moshe, Soras and Midyanim, harass the Midianites, Kitzorim heim lachem, because they harass you. And the Medrash Tanchumen is brought down in the Miri and Sanhedrin. The Medrash Tanchumen says that from here we see Habar laharcha hashkem lahargo. If somebody comes to kill you, you get up and kill him. Now we have other psukim in the Torah that mention the same halacha, machteres. If someone digs into your house at night, and there's reason to assume that he's going to kill you under certain circumstances, or we have other psukim that regarding telling us if someone comes to kill somebody else, so that person as well, other people are required to kill the one who's attempting murder. To save the person that he's trying to murder. So, but those psukim, those verses deal with individuals. Soras HaMidyanim harass the Midianites because they harass you. That's talking about the nation. In other words, where a nation attacks me, then that as a nation, that nation is considered a pursuer. The law is that someone pursues after another person to kill him. You can murder that individual. You can kill that individual to prevent him from killing. But what is true about an individual, the pasuk of Tzoras and Midyanim, tells us about a nation. That a nation that pursues us, we can't remain silent. We have to defend ourselves. And it's not enough to defend ourselves from the attack of today. But we have to defend ourselves from the attack of tomorrow also. We see from the Gemara in Ervid by an individual that when an individual comes, attacks the Jewish people to kill some Jews, and even if he comes to just to steal from them, but if allowing him to steal will open up a Pandora's box, will give them the ability to come again and again and again and kill Jews. So even on Shabbos, you take weapons and you fight them. And that's what we're dealing with, a small community, with a few individuals. But when we deal with a nation, when they come. And this is not an isolated event. How many times in every month and every year were missiles sent from Gaza? One has to make themselves stupid to assume, oh, just put down your guns. Make a ceasefire. If we make a ceasefire, it's a ceasefire only for us. I always say a person has to remember history. Skoyimo Solam. What happened to all these agreements? And what's interesting is they openly say that they're not going to stop. They openly say that they're going to continue to murder Jews. I don't know, maybe they'll admit for one day. But time and time again, from the very beginning of all these peace treaties, there were always severe consequences with the loss of life. Why is it that you find people who make themselves stupid? Because they're not scared about their own lives. And they're not scared about somebody else's life. So because of that, one cannot say that we will have peace. There isn't going to be peace. Because they will only know that they will only know that there is a price to pay. Only when they know there's a price to pay. And there are those people that they don't care. And they will continue to act in that manner. So sometimes when we have Rahmanis, when we display Rahmanis, it's the very opposite, Rahman. It promotes murder. And I mention always, where were these people the day after the first attack? Where were these left-wing groups who promote women's rights? Why weren't they screaming about how these freedom fighters, as they call themselves, came in and raped women? They're hypocrites. It has nothing to do with that. It's just they want to join an alliance. You find that I saw on the news, they interviewed a man holding the rainbow flag, who was joining the Palestinians in their demonstrations. And one of the news reporters went over to him. He said, do you know that if you would be in Gaza, they would probably kill you? He says, I heard that. So how come you're demonstrating? Well, I am for freedom. So then why is he carrying the gay flag? But the answer is, in the United States, there is an alliance. Call it a left-wing alliance. And each one joins that alliance because of some peculiarity. Whether it's because because they're Palestinians, whether it's because they support gay rights, whether it's because they for some reason think that supporting the Black Lives Matters group, which there's certainly nothing wrong in every person's life matters, but there is an alliance. Sometimes when you have an organization, when you have a group, what caused me to join the group becomes unimportant. But what becomes important is the group. Sometimes we find, even in the Torah world, groups dedicated to Torah and mitzvahs, groups dedicated to the learning of Torah. But the group itself, the existence of the group, and the strength of the group becomes more important than the reason for the group. Sometimes we have a bad sense of priority. And because we want to keep the group strong, we make compromises because the existence of the group is more important than the reason we joined the group. That gay person was holding a flag because that's why he was part of the group. But what he was demonstrating, it was to keep the group strong. And all these people that are joining this group, why are they joining the group? They're joining the group. They probably each had his own reason for joining the group. And even though the reasons are in conflict with one another, even though the Muslim society would kill the person who advocates of gay rights, the Muslim society would kill women who don't cover their faces. But all these people come together because the group is more important than the reasons they joined the group. But they proudly display the reasons to show that they're part of the group. And what's interesting is, I was shocked to see certain people dressed in Hasidic garb. And I saw how the Palestinians were smiling, almost making fun of them, when they marched with Palestinian flags. I don't know, maybe they use these flags in Simchas Torah also. But why is it that they joined the group? And it's not, people attribute, and some of these people are associated with groups that really generally demonstrate Ahavas Yisrael. And here they join together with the contemporary Nazis. They come like the capos of old. On one hand, they can demonstrate Ahavas Yisrael. They'll go into the hospitals more than anybody else to help Jewish patients. And not just Jewish patients that are part of their group. On the other hand, they march with the contemporary Nazis of today. How are we to understand it? But the power of hate, Freud said, is greater than the power of love. Their hatred for the state is stronger than their love of the Jews, even though they might have enormous love for the individual Jews. And to a certain degree, they become part of this group also. This group that has hatred for the state of Israel. But all the other members of this group, it's not just hatred for the state of Israel. It's hatred for the Jewish people as well. So there is a mitzvah. There is a mitzvah of Soras Midyanim, Kitzorim Heim Lachem, harass the Midianites who harass you. Now, when the whole nation becomes a pursuer, when the nation as a nation pursues the Jewish people, whatever is necessary to save the Jewish people, and not just to save the Jewish people for the next 5 minutes, but to save the Jewish people long term. That's part of the mitzvah. If they place their children as shields, and at the same time they tried to kill us, they try to kill our children, they try to kill our grandparents, that's part of Muhammad. That's war. There's a difference between an individual pursuer and the pursuer of nations. When a nation is a pursuer against another nation, so whatever is necessary for us to save our nation is part of the mitzvah of Soras Midyanim Kitzorim Heim Lachem. But it's interesting. It's a Milchemes mitzvah. But to me, it's clear. I know my father at times seemed to suggest differently, but to me, it's clear that there is a difference between Milchemes Yisrael Miyat Sor Shaba Alehem, the war of the Jews against the nation that attacked them, and the other two Milchemes mitzvah, the war against Amalek and the war against the 7 nations. The war against Amalek and the war against the 7 nations, there we go to war against them. But the war, the defensive war of Miyat Sor Shaba Alehem, from an enemy that attacked them, we are not going to war against them. They came to war against us. There you don't need, even according to the other Gersa, you do not need the permission of the Urim V'Tumim. You need the permission of the Urim V'Tumim where you are going to initiate the war. But where they're initiating the war, then you don't need their permission. Milchemes Yisrael Miyat Sor Shaba Alehem, the war of the Jews against the nation that attacked them. You don't need permission. We don't need the Urim V'Tumim. We had the Urim V'Tumim, sure, No problem in asking. We always seek guidance, but it's not a prerequisite. A pursuer, even a nation that is a pursuer, we have a mitzvah to pursue them. And I think that that's the mitzvah that we're facing today. The mitzvah we have today is a mitzvah, it's a mitzvah of milchama. It's a mitzvah of not waging war, but confronting the war. And whatever is necessary. Of course, you don't bomb if it's not necessary. But unfortunately, when you fight a war, casualties will be there, and the casualties won't always be soldiers. War can't be fought any other way. We have to eliminate the murderers who are consistently and constantly attacking and killing the Jewish people in a most barbaric fashion. And you have these so-called tzaddikim. Oh, it was a terrible thing they did, but Israel has been murdering them throughout the generations, etc., etc. What about those who placed bombs where there were carriages of babies throughout the years? And then they would say, we hope that the violence will come to an end. Yes, just let them attack you. You don't go in to defend yourself. Because it ended here, and then the next time they attack you, it stops and ends there again. There's no mitzvah in being stupid, especially being stupid results in people getting killed. I think now we have a problem. We live in the United States. I've mentioned this before. In theory, we should go fight the war also. But I think, I mention always when there's a war, there are people that cook the food. There are people that fix the equipment. Not everybody is pulling the trigger of the gun. Not everybody is shooting rockets. There are all kinds of necessities that are necessary for a war. And they're all part of the army. They might not be on the battlefield. They might be involved in communication. But all of this is necessary for a war. We in the United States have the opportunity to apply public pressure, which is necessary for the war. We have the political pressure. You know, they have the American government, the first thing, oh yes, we support Israel. And then, no, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't hold certain types of guns. So they try to Osemaisa Zimri umavake schar kepinchas. Especially if there are demonstrations. And they're scared about the elections. We have the responsibility to let them know. We will hold them responsible. When the elections come, sometimes that means with some people, they'll have to change who they vote for. but we have to let them know. Those who are against the Jewish people, somehow they're getting a lot of attention, and some officials are scared how it'll affect their election. We have to fight back and let them know that's our part, our role in being the army of Klal Yisrael, being the army of the Jewish people. I want to mention, I heard that there are some Rosh Yeshivas or Rabbanim, I don't know if it's true, I don't want to be Choshe B'Cherim, that suggested that should not participate in many of these demonstrations. All I can say is that when it came to aid, although many Rosh Yeshivas, like Gudas Yisrael, recently came out with a statement that you should participate, but I understand that there is a difference of opinion. Other people say no. I didn't hear that other people say you shouldn't participate in demonstrations together with the non-Jews against aid to private education. I remember very clearly when they were thinking of taking away the draft deferment from yeshiva, from clergy, which had meant that yeshiva boys in the United States and those studying for the priesthood in the churches and those studying in the conservative and reform seminaries would have had to been drafted into the army during the Vietnam War. For some reason, they found reason to work together with them. And I know of at least 2 cases where there were demonstrations for aid to private education, that the Orthodox crowd was involved together with the non-Jews, with the churches. Really, is aid to private education more important than the lives of our brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisrael? I think we have to think about that. What is unfortunate, I was born after World War II, and I heard from survivors, and I heard from the next generation of Americans who with shame look back how their parents who were immigrants didn't work on behalf of the Jews in Europe the way they should have. But we don't even have that excuse. We say in Yom Kippurim, we and our ancestors sinned, made mistakes. A lot of mistakes were made during World War II. We have to make sure not to repeat those mistakes, because when we repeat those mistakes, it isn't only a detriment for us, it's a detriment for the past generations as well. Let us hope that we will galvanize our strength at this time, and in our own way, join our brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisrael who are fighting for their lives. I think part of the problem why some people have an attitude that it's not necessary to demonstrate is because they don't feel the sakana. They don't feel they're in trouble. So first of all, Kol Yisrael Areivim Zeh Lezeh. If they're in trouble, we're in trouble by definition. But it's more than that. If they're in trouble, if the nations of the world are able to oppress them and to kill them, we are next. Don't think it's just their children that are going to be killed. Their children might be killed first. Our children will be next in line. And it will be our responsibility because we didn't use our political power to demonstrate that we are together with our brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisrael. Okay.
Your questions in the chat. If this is Muhammad's mitzvah and in Gaza as a nation have a rodef, is it misplaced rachamim to be giving aid to the quote innocent people of Gaza?
I think that there are very few innocent people in Gaza, to be honest. I think that if whatever the war effort, basically, David HaMelech, when he went to war, he told that when the Jewish people asked to go to war, he told them after he decided that we should go to war, it was a Melchemes HaRishus, he told them to talk to the generals, that the generals should outline a way how the war is to be fought. These are the type of questions that the experts, both military and diplomatic experts, and you can't ignore the military. That's unfortunately what very often happens. We ignore the military. They have to work together to see what is in the best long-term interest of the Jewish people.
So is there halachic limitations to aid that we could give them or should give them to this?
Whatever will work best for saving the lives of the Jews long term, that has to be the criteria.
If there's like 600,000 or more Jews at the rally on Tuesday, can you make a bracha for seeing so many Jews in one place?
I'm not sure that we know exactly that they're all 600,000 will be Jewish.
Okay, thank you everyone, and hatzlacha for everyone who's traveling for the rally. And Hashem should watch over all of Klal Yisrael everywhere, especially the Shvuyim.